Give people something to do while I'm preaching, But all that said, there are a list of new classes beginning next Sunday in there, so check that out. Make a decision. If you can't make a decision, just use the old Columbus method, sight and land, just try that. I'm gonna pass this around, so if you would. I would advise you use your real name this time, that would be good. All right, we will pick up our conversation in just a second, but let's begin with prayer. Father God, give us a sense of your presence with us, and more than that, help us to be present with you as we move through our lives. Help us by our words and our actions, not just this day and at this time and place because it's convenient and maybe a little bit easier, but always help our words and our actions to represent you well. Help us to be part of your team that is making the world a better place. Help us to partner with you in that. Thank you for each person here. Thank you for their desire to make this outpost of the kingdom look a little bit more like the kingdom will ultimately look. It's through Christ we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so we've talked about several things in here. Just to go back immediately to last week, finally got to work through Mark chapter 11. Jesus is cleaning out the temple, or actually it's a symbolic action. He's not really, doing anything other than this. Maybe too violent an image, I don't know, but sending a shot across the bow of the religious leaders and saying, hey, you are operating in such a way that even the temple is not functioning as it should. And Jesus points out the temple should be what? Do you remember from last week?
All nations.
House of prayer for all nations. And instead, it's become he's quoting from Isaiah there, then he quotes from Jeremiah and says, instead he turned it into a den of robbers. Just quickly, is a den of robbers where they do the bad stuff? That's where that's their safe spot. You've turned this into a safe spot, so you go out and you live however you jolly well please, and you exploit whoever you want to exploit, and you just do whatever it is that you want to do. Let's see, in their case, it could be any time. We would say Monday through Saturday. But then you kind of come to the temple and you kind of hang out and are nice people in the temple and as needed offer sacrifices and that sort of thing, and everything is both hunky and dory. And he's saying, that's not how it works. My temple is supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry.
No, he told you to sit.
I thought he said don't sit there.
No, I said.
We have an illustration right here of a miscommunication.
She can't do my accent this time.
It was the way you waved your hand.
You wave with an accent.
It was a Nigerian wave.
I thought Pam was coming.
So
I go track.
thank goodness this is not being sent out on live stream. Anyway, so we have the temple is supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. And then Paul uses that same terminology in 1 Corinthians 3 to say the church is the temple. The church is to be the place where all people can have access to God. So I do hope we walk away with that. We've been slogging through some questions that you all raised in our some of you who were here the first week, let's just define culture. If we're talking about being multicultural, what are we talking about with culture? I'm not going to review all of that. The idea of not wanting to offend people. We talked about in that just being vulnerable, being willing to ask questions, being willing to say, hey, can I ask you something about your background? And being willing to say, I don't want to be offensive, and if I am, it's certainly not my intent. we talked, while we're thinking through that question about not wanting to offend, you see someone who's a visitor in our assemblies, a lot of times our thought is sort of the self-defense, sort of, I wonder what they're doing here. We talked about changing our mindset on that. People don't show up to churches these days just because they're looking for something to do on a Sunday morning. So the people have made a decision to be here, change the narrative in our head about visitors. Assume they are here because there's something inside them that brought them here, hopefully a desire to be a little closer to God. And we want to be that welcoming presence of God at that moment. We talked about, how do you avoid a split? If not everyone is on board with this, how do we avoid a split with those who may not want to come along? And the reality is, anytime the culture changes, and by culture here, at least one of the this is not the Everett Hufford definition, but culture is the way we do things around here. Anytime the culture changes, there's going to be pushback. That's just reality. You start, if you realize, hey, our family, we're just so scattered, so this is what we're going to start doing. We're going to start, and some of you go, well, that's what we always do. Well, if we say, okay, in our case, boys, we are going to start, on this night at this time, we're all actually going to sit around this table and have a meal together. Oh, we can't do that, and you've got, that messes up our schedule. No, we're all that's going to be on our schedule now. That's one thing we're going to do. Anytime you change the way we're doing things, people are going to push back. They're not going to like it. So it may not always be smooth, is one of the things we talked about, and we talked about this some last week. The idea of needing to just continue the conversation, maybe on an individual level, of helping people to see, this sort of stuff. Going back and reviewing some of the stuff that J.C. Thomas shared with us. This is part of God's intent. If we are uncomfortable with being in a multicultural setting, we're going to be uncomfortable in heaven if Revelation is painting a good picture for us. And so there's just kind of helping people to just kind of continue to give them space and information to think through that, and understand why it might be tough for some folks to think through. Because though we are long past the time when people, I think, openly taught that churches should be monocultural, we're long past the time when that is openly taught, but we are not past the time where that is our practice. We need to describe where we're going. And that's part of a role that I think those of us who are trying to think through this can continue to do for people. Now, one of the things that was another question that I just want to handle pretty quickly, and then I want us to jump into this one for the rest of today. The idea that, hey, in doing this, that somehow we might compromise the truth. That's certainly, I just don't see that as anyone's intent here. I don't think anyone is going, we need to compromise what we believe God is calling us to and who we believe God is calling us to be for the sake of attracting folks. I don't think anybody is saying that. I don't think that's part of the conversation at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I would just suggest that seeking monocultural churches has been the compromise of the truth. And that, again, maybe we kind of need to turn our thought on that. Wait, what is the compromise of the truth here? Becoming more inclusive culturally, or saying, no, what God really wants is for all of us to be in our own little cubicles. That does not seem to be the what's presented to us in the Bible, certainly not as God's ultimate goal. and we can, if you want to come back to that, but I just want to lay that to rest. I don't see anybody in this saying, well, you know what it's going to take to compromise people is, we're going to have to start saying adultery is okay. Nobody is saying that, just for instance, let's pick a commandment and say we're not going to observe it anymore. That's simply not it. How do we move in this direction without feeling or appearing fake? That was a question that appeared with a couple of people. How do we do this without it looking like we're faking it? Okay. First of all, I'm not a huge believer, although there are, everything, a stopped clock is right twice a day. All right. So, there's one of those things that, yes, there probably is a time and place, but I'm not a great believer in fake it till you make it. Okay. Maybe there are times and places where that's. But how do we move in this direction? I hear that as saying, how do we do this and do this sincerely? And I think that's a good question. I want to change this question up just a little bit, though, because I think if I change it just a little bit, it will actually get us here. Instead of just how do we move in this direction without appearing or feeling fake, is to think, since I'm standing up here, I'll explain it. Assuming that this be a monocultural church, we'll just assume that. And if that's hard for you to assume, we'll fake it till you make no. Just for our purposes of our discussion today, let's just institutionalize that. What do you mean by that, Greg? I'm not talking first about, let's establish a ministry, or let's, establish a, I'm not against institutionalizing those sorts of things, but I want to get kind of behind that. It's not about creating a ministry or for the individual and the personal level. How do we practice a mindset that is open to Oliver Creek being a multicultural meeting ground for people who want to be connected to God? So here's what I'd like for you. We're talking more, not the institutional level. What programs can we establish? What ministries can we establish? What events can we host? But thinking on kind of the that we may need to cultivate. What are some actions that we can take as individuals that we don't need the permission of a program or ministry or event to take? Does that make sense? So what I'd like for us to do is I'm going to put about 2 minutes on the clock, and with a conversation partner or two, just kind of talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll whiteboard some stuff, see what we can come up with. So what attitudes do we need to cultivate? What actions can we take even without the benefit, so to speak, of a ministry program event? Any questions? Do you understand what I'm asking? Okay. I'm going to start the 2 minutes. You can start anytime you want with a conversation partner. You can move around if you want. It does not matter. You can start anytime you want as long as it is now.
Instead of a like
I'm not listening. I can't hear you. Just a simple.
It's more effective, and that way, you know, being genuine, being curious, and asking questions. I've met some people that don't, and it's just because of who I am as a person. That's why we're always so fascinated by, like, true crime and serial killers and all that. Yeah, because we want to understand why is it not as much? I would be doing
About 30 more seconds.
part of the process. If you're really judging other people, oh, you're judging because look, you say grazie for thank you, and prego for your welcome. There you go. And ciao, amore.
All right, if we can't pull it back together,
It means eat.
finish the sentence that you're on, but please don't add prepositional phrases. All right, so, yeah, no dangling participles. So let's start with the attitudes idea. What are some of the attitudes that we can just start practicing on our own, you know, without the benefit of program, event, ministry, whatever? What are some of the attitudes you would suggest?
Being friendly.
Okay? In a world where you can be anything, you can be friendly.
Welcoming, whatever you want to say. Inviting. Lots of words.
One, Sharon, one word at a time.
That's good. He can't write that fast.
I can't.
I'm watching and he can.
So anyway, as we, so, isn't that simple? Can you do that? Is that going to be something that feels natural to some of us? You know, because we kind of come into, you know, our assemblies or class settings, and we've got our church hat on. You know, we're kind of in that direction. We're kind of in that mode. And isn't that really kind of a self-focused sort of thing? We don't always label it that way, you know? Or I'm focused on God. Can we focus on God by focusing on whoever else is around us? Maybe that's where we're going to meet God. That's sort of a Matthew 25 thing. What you got?
This isn't my group's thinking, but
Did they vote you down?
He doesn't represent.
I didn't get to talk about it.
Were they not friendly and welcoming to you?
They're friendly amongst them. I was in the midst. Yeah. But
Mother.
you know how in the Bible it says many parts but one body. It's like I'm almost curious if we had. I mean, we have like 3 or 4 classes, but why not at some point have like 10 classes with 5 to 10 like smaller classes that think out different subjects that we're interested in, and like that might attract more people that are also interested in subjects that we've never discussed in a public setting. It's just if we had more room to do smaller group classes. I mean, that's not exactly culture, but it opens to the questions of things that we haven't discussed in the past.
allows you to get to know people more.
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna put that under an action, a possible action step. And I'm not, because my ignorance knows no bounds. You know, I've been here 4 months, but are in some ways, because I know we're limited space-wise in terms of, you know, if we were doing it during like typical Bible class hours, but are there attempts to get people involved in smaller settings and smaller groups?
Yeah. Like
We do that on Wednesday nights.
throughout
That's
the
what we've
week.
been trying to do. Yeah.
Those have been transforming. Transformation groups, sorry. Connect those dots. All right. But yeah, there is something to that, because the idea of there's got to be ways in which people can make connection at a deeper level than we sit in the same large room for worship. Yeah, no, I think that's, and notice please, as we will find, my guess is a lot of these things, that is, when people are in settings where they can get to know people on a deeper level, that has nothing to do with skin color or nationality or anything. I dare say if we put 5 of us in a room, randomly selected,
He's being disfellowshipped next.
no, because it was Bible app. It was not, you can't disfellowship someone for the Bible app. Had it been,
Unless it's an NIV version.
what's that?
If it's the NIV version, you can.
NIV. By the way, Billy, what version was that?
I don't know, it's possessed.
That's order.
Even more. Bring that to class next week. Foul demon of the cell phone, come out.
We're off track.
But this idea, even if you took any 5 of us, chosen randomly, and put us in a smaller setting with some prompt questions, you would find out things about people that you could not find out in any other setting. So this, goes beyond, but it certainly is. Here's the thing is, you always find out there's connections, there's ways that you can kind of connect with people that you would not see on the surface. So yeah, that can be something. I want to go back to attitudes. What are we thinking in terms of we've had be friendly, be welcoming. What are some other things that you can from the same? Yes.
Go ahead.
Either one.
You go.
Okay.
Alphabetical order. Okay.
No?
Last name or first name? Okay, here's the deal.
That would be you.
Okay, that would be me. Okay, here's the deal. I'm thinking one of the first things is, attitude-wise, is I've got to ask myself, what are my prejudices? And what may keep me from wanting to be friendly or welcoming to someone based on how they look. And so until I know, is it that I'm shy, legitimately shy? Is it that I'm legitimately, an anxious person who doesn't feel comfortable talking to strangers? Or is it that I see that person and go, oh, that person
Right.
is a bad person because of?
Mm-hmm. And I like, I put the word preconceptions on there because prejudices were, well, I'm not prejudiced, but do we all have preconceptions?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we've all got preconceptions. My wife points out to me regularly that if someone is doing something bizarre in a vehicle in front of us, that I always refer to the driver in the feminine.
She.
I don't know why Michelle pointed that out to me, but I'd gone much of my driving life, all 6 years of it, being, and then realized that's a preconception. And I apologize, ladies, you know, that's a, but it's just there, and I do not even recognize that.
Compromising the truth.
What's that? Oh.
Save that for the smaller group setting of men.
Yeah, that's right.
It's okay.
Hey, at least none of this is being live streamed. All right, so.
All the women drivers refer to the bad drivers as either Greg or Rick.
Look at that Greg up there. It's, and well deserved, I might add. But no, I just examining our own preconceptions, and sometimes we're not aware of them. I mean, that was my point. But you know, because sometimes it takes someone to say, hey, you seem to have this attitude towards this person or this group of people or whatever.
Great.
I mean, I'd always be aware of that. Yes,
It
ma'am.
makes me think of one thing that we talked about was the youth group kind of had a focus recently, like a +1, I think they called it, where they were really trying to hammer to the kids. Think about just one person. Who's one person that you could ask to come to the Thursday night gathering, come to church with you, come to trunk, whatever it is. And I do think that just one big step, and the first one being friendly and welcoming, is just to ask for eyes to even see it. Like to see it. Is there room at the pew next to you or in the lobby instead of the same family faces that you see and love, but like look for somebody that isn't maybe someone that you have spoken to, or and the small groups that we had that we are just finishing in on Wednesday night, and the guest who's coming to dinner. I mean, literally had people sitting at my own dining room table that I had never seen before. And you're right, you make connections, you do all that, but I think I can be overwhelmed by a program or a ministry of we've got to bring in, you know, this great cultural movement, when really it comes down to an individual. What can I do? Can I pray every day to have eyes to see the person who maybe I've never connected with that I need to, if that makes sense.
And being aware of our
Awareness,
preconceptions that I may walk in a room and naturally look around and look for the faces that look like
They're
mine.
familiar. And last Sunday I sat in the very back, right up at the front, but I was sitting in the back. And I saw so many people that I had never even seen on Sunday morning before, which makes me think maybe I don't need to just pick my pew every time and sit somewhere different once in a while. Because I talked to some people who, I mean, I had never met, and they'd been there for a long time. And it was, I don't know, got me out of my comfort pew, I guess you could say.
That's good. That's, you know, because how many, and just, you know, okay, everybody close their eyes and bow their heads, and no. But just show of hands, how many of you sit basically in the same place almost every Sunday?
And if I do today, y'all go see. She went right on back.
You know?
Right on back to the
So, you know, and we get comfortable with our little sphere. Maybe some intentional movement is a good thing.
And then people be mad at us for sitting in their spot.
But wouldn't that be helping them to address their preconceptions?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Maybe.
yes.
David, maybe.
different.
I saw your hand, David.
Two thoughts. One was the comfortable thing was if we recognize where we're comfortable and sort of challenge that a little bit. What I was thinking, I was reminded, I think it was last year, there was a Syrian family that we were, like Kara was sort of helping their mom. She met them through Asha's Refuge. She invited them to come last year to trunk or treat. So she mentioned to Kara when she was here last year, how awkward she felt when she came. Because she, you know, head covering, all of those things. She was curious about wanting to, like, do Halloween in Syria. They do, you know, it's just like, but her kids are now in school here. She wants them to get to, like, understand what's going on. But she felt very uncomfortable. She felt like all eyes were on her, you know, maybe even thought like, are you dressed up like that? Or is that what you're wearing? It's on her, right?
I didn't even occur to me that
There was all
yeah,
these
that's
things that,
interesting.
like her thoughts, but it's like, when we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, like
Yeah.
from a comfort level,
Yeah.
you know, as we move into this, like for someone to step in, like, who's the uncomfortable one here?
Yeah.
Um,
And going back to, you know, Sharon leading with be friendly and be welcoming, I mean, if someone is coming into our space, be it trunk or treat or our assembly or a class or a small group or anything like that, is it not incumbent on the host? Like, you know, folks coming to your house, guess who's coming to dinner? Okay, come on in. Yeah, find a place, I don't care. Sit down, you know. How welcoming, you know. But, you know, I think we think about that when we have someone in our own home, but this is our home. Is it incumbent on us to recognize, you know, where someone might be a little uncomfortable? And see, like, think about what she's trying to do too, by the way. At least one of the reasons she was willing to come to Trunk or Treat was because her kids are here now, they're in school, and learning about American ways of doing things, which, you know, you gotta start with Halloween. You know, but, you know, trying to understand it. She's trying to enculturate her kids. She's making an effort. That goes back to our thing about, you know, our assumption about visitors. What are they doing here? Wait, can we change that? For whatever reason they're there, it must be a good, solid, legitimate reason in their mind, and can we honor that? You know? And I think that's really, you know, really important. Well, I'd love it if she came back this year. Billy and then Emmanuel.
I like what she said about guess who's coming to dinner or sitting in a different place than we normally do in church. Alan Wagner, in his class over there, said that he does that. He sits in a different place all the time. So for Mitch and I, we took it upon ourselves to do that. We normally sit in the same seat. I got my name on everything. And we normally sit there all the time. So one time we moved, people said, where's Billy? Where's Demetrius? Couldn't sit nowhere because we weren't there. I'm saying this because of this. When we moved to a different place, kind of like in a different culture, you know, we're not too familiar with the people around us. We saw different ones that we hadn't seen before, who was that, and so forth. So when we're trying to embrace this multicultural idea, I think it's a good idea that we practice on ourselves. We move around. If Rick, you used to sit where I know you sit. You sit right there all the time. Move over here sometimes. Get in a different place so we can kind of see what a different place, different people see.
Let's examine our own preconceptions. To just refer you back to. Yeah, Emmanuel.
Our group said you should be more curious and ask questions. And if I may add, they didn't say this, but the question should be about the other person's culture, not questions like, how do you like it here in America? What they ask me, oh, aren't you just lucky to be here?
Yeah. It does come across that way, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. They actually ask that question.
Oh, cool. Wow. I was hoping they were a little more subtle than I was with that, yeah.
I mean, I teach kids all the time to ask questions, and because that's part of what I do. But one of the things I was talking about with Maggie and them is being able to be genuine about it and putting in there, like, okay, look, from my experience, I don't understand this because I grew up here, you know, and I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? Can you tell me this? Can you make that connection? And being genuine and authentic about your curiosity, and not and really thinking about where your tone comes in, because sometimes that can come off as judgy and the people think that you're being judgy. But I've had a lot of people that I've talked to in the past and I've just been like, I'm really not judging. I really want to know. And because I was so earnest and so genuine about it and so vulnerable, I was able to get some really good answers and some really interesting things, and I learned something that I didn't know before. And I think that's asking questions and coming from a genuine place of like, okay, I don't understand that because of my background, but this is really cool that we're sharing this and I've learned something new. And I think that a willingness to learn something new is a good attitude to take, as not in a judgy way, but in a, hey, I've learned something about you and I've learned something about your culture. This is really cool. And then I can apply that to somebody else that I talk to. And so that's nice.
Here's the deal. I mean, you're saying talking about teaching kids that. Don't kids kind of up to a certain age when we, try to, knock it out of them, don't they naturally ask
Yes.
questions?
Everything. Especially if they're 5.
What did Jesus say? How about becoming like little kids, and we always associate that with, having a childlike faith. I'm not sure I know what that is, but, we always associate that, and it sounds good in lessons and things like that. But, just that, have you lost curiosity about life? I mean, look at what Jesus did. Do you know how many questions he asked? Just read through the Gospels and notice the number of questions Jesus asks, and then stack that up against the number of questions Jesus actually answered. And there's a lot more questions he asked, including when people would ask him questions, what was his typical response? A question. And it's not that Jesus is going, okay, I gotta have time to think here. I don't think that's at all. He's getting the other person to think, and he's connecting.
Strangers don't take candy from strangers.
See, this is that.
And
Except-
one of the things about children is they're humble.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, this is what was brought out in our group, is for us to be humble. A lot of times when you can smell the fragrance of humbleness.
Mm-hmm.
However, pride smells a certain way as well.
Mm.
And children pick up, and not only does children pick that up, adults
Pick that up.
pick that up, and if the situation is not a humble situation, a lot of times people will refrain from developing a relationship with you.
Absolutely.
I don't think any of that is possible without humility and trust. Has to be a trust on the other end, trust in, well, I think first and foremost God, and then trust that you can communicate with the other and just have, approach every conversation as something that's genuine, that person wants to get to know me just as much as I want to get to know them. Just assume that. Assume that, and that is not the way our society works. Good news is that's not the way that society works. Any society has worked at any point, at any time, so we're no different in that sense. So humility and trust, if we start there, then all these other things start opening up.
Greg, I was gonna say, when we lived in Barton, we had some Vietnamese people that moved across the street from us, and she could not speak the English language, but her sons could, so she started sending her sons across the street to ask us questions, and they would go back and tell the mom. Eventually, when she learned to speak a few words, it opened the door for her to speak. And one of the things that she spoke was, it's funny, he works, you not work. and she knew those words because she watched and she seen, you know, and it doesn't matter like what culture we're in, everybody knows a smile. Everybody. I don't care if you speak the language or don't speak the language of, everybody knows your facial expressions everywhere. So if we have an attitude of welcoming and we have a heart of welcome them, in other words, we're not fake, we don't put on that, then that's how we develop the relationship for welcoming people in, is our attitude, how we project it to other people.
Very good. Luke, had your hand.
Yeah, culture. Jesus had 12 disciples, and they were all Jewish. Why didn't Jesus have multicultural apostles? I mean, within the Jewish culture, there was probably subcultures, but why did he?
So why did
all of his apostles?
why did Jesus say, you know, that gets back to that idea of that scandal of particularity, that it is the God in the flesh is a Jewish male from the first century, and yet he trains those 12 to then, you know, you take Matthew's last, go to all nations. You know, you are how all nations are going to become part of this relationship with God. So, you know, in a sense, think of us as the 12, we're the 12 insiders, but our mission is to go outside, you know, to be aware of, to recognize the borders of our comfort zones, to recognize that, don't want that to fall on, he's already given blood. Recognize the borders of our comfort zones and blast right through them. You know? And how difficult is it? Read the book of Acts. God had to push them over each barrier. You know? And so that, I think, is, here's the deal. If we practice these attitudes, this is a great list. By the way, this is a great list. If we practice these attitudes, I think we're going to go a long way towards the idea of where we don't even have to talk about multicultural. We can start talking about everyone is welcome. And that ultimately is, I think, what God has in mind. You know? So we don't even have to think about it. Now, here's the good thing, is we can take these attitudes and we can start practicing them now. You know? I mean, you know, we don't have to wait until, I'm looking for a multicultural person. No, we can start practicing these, you know, amongst ourselves. And then, just like Jesus saying, I want to teach you guys how to love one another, as wacko macquacko as you 12 are, and as far behind the curveball as you are, I'm going to teach you guys how to love each other, and then maybe you can teach other people to do it. You know? So I would just say, pick a favorite attitude here and put it to work today. All right, thank you so much. New classes next week.